Hi, my name is Anna, and I am a facilitator with Jessie's Legacy, and we are an organization that works out of the Family Services of the North Shore. And we provide education and support services to those who are struggling with disordered eating or eating disorders, mainly providing education and really promoting awareness in the community. The organization Jessie's Legacy was founded in the name of a young girl named Jessie who struggled with the eating disorder anorexia nervosa, and unfortunately she didn't survive her struggle with anorexia, and so her parents created Jessie's Legacy in her name and to honor her life. And the presentation that you're going to be seeing today is one that we do in secondary schools, providing education about these issues and getting kids talking about what disordered eating is, and just to have a heightened awareness about it and to hopefully support them in being able to find protective factors for themselves, so that, or also to engage with their friends around these issues and support their own health and hopefully mitigate more and more eating disorders coming into being, because they are so prevalent among adolescents. So mainly what we're going to be speaking about today is preventing disordered eating, and that has to do with really looking at how we think and how we talk about our bodies, and hopefully changing that discussion from more of a negative context to more of a positive context. And when we're looking at how we think and talk about our bodies, it's really important to reflect on how we're thinking and talking about our bodies to ourselves, and then also in relation with other people, and also in our environment. So those are three areas that we really look at in relation to disordered eating. I'm going to start with a video so that you can see. This video provides you with some information about prevalency rates in terms of eating disorders and disordered eating, and it also introduces a term called fat talk, which is more of a derogatory, judgmental term that then we're going to discuss a bit more later. So you can kind of watch for those two elements in the video. So like I said, that in the video they introduce a term called fat talk, and fat talk can have such a huge impact, or how we talk about our bodies can have such a huge impact on our self-esteem and how we evaluate ourselves, how we see ourselves in the world. And sometimes this negative self-talk, or forms of negative self-talk or judgment about weight or size, or just how someone looks versus who they are, that kind of negative talk is quite common in our Western culture, unfortunately, and sometimes it's so ingrained, or it can be really ingrained in the way we talk, that we don't even notice it's around us. So to exemplify that point, there's a video from Mean Girls that we want to show that provides you with an example of some adolescent girls really engaging in negative self-talk and focusing specifically on their aesthetic, their physical appearance, and being quite judgmental.
She's like a Martian.
God, my hips are huge.
Oh, please, I hate my calves.
At least you guys can wear halters. I've got man shoulders.
I used to think there was just fat and skinny. Apparently there's a lot of things that can be wrong on your body.
My hairline is so weird.
My pores are huge.
My nail beds suck. I have really bad breath in the morning.
So,
Ew.
as you could tell, in that clip, there's a lot of judgment around how their bodies are, what their bodies look like, and also a lot of pressure to engage in that kind of negative self-talk and discussion with one another. And so one thing that we usually talk with kids a lot about is, what forms of fat talk or negative self-talk do you see in your community, either within your school environment or within broader environments like media, internet. And so this question we posed here, can you think of any examples of fat talk that have become natural between you and your friends? I think it's a great question to just reflect on in terms of where you see it in your life, because it's different for all of us. But I find that when I do turn my gaze to that question, I notice how prevalent it really is. So then it's finding ways to negotiate that kind of discussion that might be around you. So now turning more to disordered eating specifically, and what is it, and defining it. I think before getting into the definition, I think it's helpful to sometimes reflect on, what does disordered eating mean to you? I think because we all have maybe different conceptualizations of it at the outset. And what do you think might be some of the effects of disordered eating in terms of physical health, social interaction, and also on a personal level? So this is something we usually like to get discussion and talk to kids about before kind of going into the exact, or more of a specific definition of it. So then turning to what is the definition of it, there's really a wide range of forms of disordered eating. It's not one particular thing. We're looking at a spectrum of behaviors and thought processes. And on the left side of this image, of this spectrum that we're seeing, there's the kind of the ideal holistic perspective, being of a healthy weight, for your age and your sex and your height, which is different for all of us. Having healthy eating habits, having healthy exercise habits, which could be different for all of us as well. Some of us like to walk, some of us are very physical or engage in sports. And one of the really resounding factors is having a good body image, having acceptance for your body, for what it is, how it is. Those three factors together, I think, are kind of the ideal on this spectrum. And then if we shift all the way over to the right side, we see the eating disorders, the three that are specifically defined clinically as anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. So anorexia if we're speaking about anorexia, we're looking at more restricting behaviors in terms of food intake, also usually a real fear of gaining weight, and also usually a distorted body image or perspective of one's body, one's sense of one's body. With bulimia, we're usually looking at, once again, sort of a distorted sense of self in terms of body shape and size, and also usually engaging in eating, but then compensating for what one's eaten either by abusing laxatives or by purging the food that they've eaten. And lastly, with binge eating disorder, usually eating struggling with how much one is eating in one sitting, sometimes compulsively overeating, but then not compensating for what one has eaten. And usually there's a lot of shame or guilt associated with binge eating disorder, which is really distressing. So there is distress among all three of those because they're all really, really very serious and can be potentially fatal. And then everything else in between this is the bulk of what this presentation speaks to. It's disordered eating. And there's a whole range of behaviors. Things like yo-yo dieting, going on and off diets, losing weight and then gaining it back again, and then getting into a cycle of eating behaviors that focus on changing your weight. It usually gets you thinking a lot more about weight and exercise and being preoccupied with those things. Weight shape preoccupation falls into that as well. You might also see excessive exercising or compulsive overeating, really struggling to regulate how much you're eating. Fasting is another potential behavior that is considered a disordered eating behavior. This is, of course, outside of the context of religion, but engaging in not eating for long periods of time. Distorted body image is very common. The central image, the one in the center here, is of a young girl who seems, by the looks of the image, is really struggling. And is very, very small and very thin. But when she looks in the mirror, she sees a girl who is a little bit bigger than her. So this is an example of that distorted body image perspective. And this could cause her to potentially engage in more restricting of food or even more exercise. And it's not an accurate representation of what her body is. Which can be quite difficult to deal with. Then in the upper right-handed corner, this is something called muscle dysmorphia that we're seeing more and more, or there are higher prevalency rates of now, and it's often with men, not entirely though. And this is where someone might really bulk up in terms of muscle mass, but when they look in the mirror, they don't see the muscle that they've gained. They see someone who doesn't have that muscle definition, who might be quite a bit smaller than they are, and that might cause them to then go exercise even more, or to start taking steroids, or engage in other behaviors to try and gain even more muscle. So it's another form of distorted body image, but it's considered, or it's called muscle dysmorphia. Then the bottom image on the right-hand side speaks to restricting of food, measuring of food, more dieting type behaviors, limiting one's food intake. And then on the far left, we're seeing a young girl who has probably engaged in excessive exercise, is probably extremely tired. And also, it's really hard for the body to recuperate if we're exercising and we're not also providing enough fuel to energize ourselves and to support the exercise we're engaging in. So it can really tax the body physically and also emotionally and cognitively, because there isn't enough fuel on board to support someone's functioning. So I think it's just, this next slide really looks at the fact that there are a wide range of disordered eating behaviors, and if it's really important that if an individual is struggling with any of the clinical eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, or binge eating disorders, it's really important that they get help in order to overcome those. But it's also important if someone's struggling with disordered eating behaviors that they also get help. We're focusing here more on disordered eating because disordered eating can lead to eating disorders. Not always, but there's the potential for it. So if people can get some support, if they're struggling, it can really help prevent the behaviors and the thought processes from accelerating and developing into something even more serious. Since there are such a wide variety of disordered eating behaviors, we wanted to reflect on what some of these are and just give you a list to look at and see, okay, have I ever engaged in any of these? Has anyone I know potentially engaged in any of these? Anything from dieting to worrying about weight, engaging in fat talk either about yourself or towards someone else, comparing bodies with friends, feeling guilty after you've eaten something, or even embarrassment eating in front of others. That can be another side of struggle around food. Feeling jealousy towards someone who's engaging in dieting or restricting, purging, over-exercising, any of those behaviors. Thinking that you're fat when others are insisting you're not, so that disordered body image is starting to present. Over-exercising or feeling guilty if you're not exercising. So any of those are potential disordered eating behaviors, and just good to have an awareness for what some of those are. So that if you yourself might be struggling or you know someone else who might be struggling, it might be time to check in with yourself or with someone else. And we provide a lot of the support services at the end, so I'll touch on those, where to go to get support afterwards. So I asked a few slides back, what do you think these things are? Now we look more at what's contributing to the development of disordered eating or eating disorders. What factors could lead someone to engage in these things? And 1 in 60 teens is actually said to meet the criteria for an eating disorder. So another question is why is disordered eating so prevalent among adolescents, among this age group? Some of the contributing factors that are listed here that might contribute to disordered eating are things like puberty. Puberty is a time when we go through natural widening and thickening in our bodies. We might feel more insecure in our bodies with the changes that are happening. We might also feel more judgment about ourselves, or towards other people, which could eventually cause us to engage in some disordered eating behaviors to maybe try to change that process or stop that process in some way. We might also have a sense that things are out of control. There's a lot in adolescence. There might be more pressure at school or extracurricular activities, or there might be stress with friendships, and turning to food and exercise to maybe gain some control or have a little corner of control in your life. That's another reason why someone might turn to disordered eating. Going on a diet is a really common one. Weight loss compliments, receiving compliments about having lost weight. People think that looks good, and then that kind of reinforces the idea that maybe you need to lose more weight or to start to engage in the behaviors. That could also go for building up muscle mass too, really feeling pressure to do that. Aesthetic sports, specifically dance or ballet or gymnastics, figure skating, or sports where people are really judged in terms of their body, how their physical body looks, could be another contributing factor. Observing a family member or friend who eats in a disordered way might make you think that, well, this is normal, this is just something I'll try on or engage in. Heightened stress could be another factor. Emotional coping mechanism, turning to food as an emotional coping mechanism. And then, of course, bullying and teasing around weight or size can be very impactful, as can gender harassment. Feeling that women are supposed to present a certain way, men are supposed to present a certain way, and judging others if they're not falling into that kind of stereotypical representation, which can then put a lot of pressure on how one might feel in relation to their body. Lastly, and one of the most important ones to also look at, is media pressure. The pressure that within media we so often see really unhealthy, unrealistic representations of people's bodies. On the left, the image on the left has been, both of these images have been photoshopped significantly. However, the image on the left has been really looked at and scrutinized, and the proportions of her body aren't anatomically possible for someone to grow into those dimensions. So if we're seeing these images and have expectations that we're supposed to look like this, these are literally impossible to achieve. So having more of a critical eye towards media is really important. We're going to now show a video that it's one of the Dove commercials that gives you kind of a backstage look at what goes on to create so many of these images that you see.
Okay, so ready, 5 minutes, camera's rolling. And we're recording sound. Let's play it. Hold it in the camera.
So now moving into looking at prevention and preventing disordered eating, do you think that any of the following factors can help prevent disordered eating, and why? Do you think personality characteristics could help prevent? Do you think family, friends, or activities might be able to prevent disordered eating? Looking at self-esteem is another really important factor to look at in this discussion of prevention. Here we've asked a few questions to personally reflect on in relation to self-esteem. What are situations when you feel good about yourself? And why do you feel good about yourself in these situations? Both of these questions are turning to having an awareness and identifying what factors might be really supportive for you in your life to turn to if things aren't going well, or to really recognize are things that bolster you in some way. In that way they can act as almost protective factors. Also, do you make positive comments to your friends about things other than appearance? And if so, what would you comment on? Would you comment on their personality? Would you comment on how funny they are? Or a lot of kids also bring up that they'd want to congratulate a friend on something that they've achieved, that they know they've been really working hard at. So things that go beyond just the way someone presents in terms of their outer appearance. This next video that that's on here is a spoken word piece created by two young men who reflect on their own negotiations with the pressure and expectation they feel to look a very particular way, and how they engage with this discussion about their body in the world. So it's a really great reflection on how young men are also struggling with these issues.
I don't know about you, but I'm trying to get this beach body, that P90X, Brad Pitt, Bradley Cooper, Tyrese, Trey Songz, Matthew McConaughey, beach body. I'm trying to sweat in front of everybody. Word. They got the shorty with them Angelina Jolie lips to lick my torso and got me looking like a wet chocolate. Look at my biceps. They're kind of puny. They're kind of chunky. But I've been working on them. We can be models. I could take off my shirt mad sexy. I can stare at the camera intensely for 37 seconds straight and not blink. I could bathe in baby oil. I can run on the beach in slow motion. I could catwalk down a runway in zebra panties. I can't do that. Having a slow metabolism ruins everything. All my friends will be in tank tops and I'll be in a hoodie. I'm good at zipping up my insecurities, thinking I can sweat them out. I'm trying to get this beach body. I'm too skinny. I guzzle junk food like my mouth's a garbage chute, but my intestines are allergic to trans fat. I want to be a flexing horse leg, galloping beach sand into a red carpet, customized for me. To strut the shore side like a centaur on a conveyor belt. I'm trying to get this beach body, but there's salvation in snack closets on licked plates of seconds at the bottom of a pint of ice cream. I use Haagen-Dazs as a morphine cylinder because she said my arms weren't strong enough to carry her. I think I'm weak. I think I'm fat. I think I'm ugly. The beach is no place for a whale like me. For a minivan with its tank on E, I want to be Baywatch bearable, broken bottle cut. Have you seen my muscles and my scars? You smell that? That's macho moisture. My hour-long workout routine consists of 5 minutes of push-ups on my bedroom floor, a denial mirror repelling my lanky limbs, 5 minutes of keeping my chin high over the bar of self-doubt, 10 minutes placing 100 pounds of failure on my chest so it becomes the elephant in the room, 10 minutes of jogging with Ghost, chuckling at my chunky thighs, and I'll smile, knowing I'll soon be able to fit into my old butt pants, 30 minutes thinking sweat is a masculinity cloak, and I'm weary from trying to work out my irrational fears, drown them in a puddle of perspiration, shove the imperfections I should be proud of underwater. My gap-toothed smile. My frizzy hair. My funny-shaped head. The extra weight that kept me grounded. The missing pounds that make me a kite flailing freely through the wind, not bound by muscle. So yes, I'm trying to get this beach body, that Channing Tatum, David Beckham, Al, Cool J, beach body. But we're tired and exhausted from trying to be something we're not.
So now looking more at building self-esteem, all acknowledging the negative self-talk and hopefully transitioning it into some more positive self-talk in the face of disordered eating specifically. These are some recommendations and possible ideas to start thinking about to do that. To start out with, really being yourself. Avoid comparing yourself to other people if possible. Acknowledging who you are, what you're capable of, what your strengths might be in the world. Also not hyperbolizing, not exaggerating when talking about your body and appearance can be quite helpful. Giving compliments to others about things besides their appearance, like I just mentioned. Also accepting compliments can be really powerful. Acknowledging what other people really appreciate in you. And maybe having those as part of your toolkit to reflect on in terms of who you are. And and some of the really wonderful elements about yourself. Focusing on things you really like about yourself, surrounding yourself with supportive friends, and also involving yourself in activities that you really enjoy. Looking now at healthy expectations. How do we cultivate healthy expectations about our bodies? This can be somewhat difficult at times. The first point here really recognizes that, sorry, I gotta go back. Looking now at healthy expectations in relation to food specifically, it's important to acknowledge that genetics play such a huge role in how our bodies develop, in determining our body size, our body shape. 50 to 80% of that is determined by genetics. So if we might engage in unhealthy behaviors to try to look a certain way when we actually we only have a limited amount of control in terms of our physical body shape and size. There's the image of the rhino here working so hard to try and become or look like a unicorn is descriptive of how unhealthy and how unrealistic it is for us to try to become something we're not. And unfortunately that can really result in a lot of distress if that's how we're maneuvering through the world. So it's really important to focus on feeling good versus pursuing unrealistic and harmful goals. Also, in terms of healthy expectations, it's important to recognize that so many of the messages about food, especially in our mass media, have quite send out negative messages about eating and enjoying food. Food it's so often a social thing that we engage in with others, that if we're getting skewed messages about what we should and shouldn't be eating, or if we're starting to feel guilty about what we're eating, this can really affect our social lives and make us feel bad about what food we're putting into our bodies, or make us really worried and obsessive about always picking the right food or what food to pick, when there is no right and wrong. It's finding a balance that supports your health and your growth. However, there are a lot of messages out there that can be quite conflicting in terms of how to engage with food. Turning more to the discussion of looking at diets, here is an image of a woman from a SlimFast ad who has been said to lose 190 pounds on SlimFast. But they also note that these results are not typical, and it's important to, when reflecting on so many of the ads that we might see about dieting or various other weight loss behaviors or strategies, to recognize that so often these results aren't typical. Usually what you're seeing advertised is quite extreme, or trying to present an image that fits with mainstream ideals, but that we might not feel good in relation to, in terms of our own sense of our bodies. So here are some statistics that are interesting to reflect on, that 98% of diets actually fail. And the biggest risk factor for developing an eating disorder is going on a diet. That's the number one. In North America alone as well, the diet industry is worth $44 billion. So it's this huge industry and business that really makes its money in many ways by advertising something to us to make us feel bad about our bodies so that we buy into their product. So it can really affect how we feel it can affect our self-esteem, our body esteem in many ways, and they make a lot of money off of it. So to critically think about those messages when you see them. And diets, so often they're not about willpower. Our biology, our metabolism plays probably the biggest role in weight loss differences between people. So it's important to recognize that. And also, if you're 5'7" and you don't get out of bed all day, you still require 1,800 calories to maintain your health. So if you're then going to go out and go to school or go for a walk and engage in go to work, do several other things, you're going to need a lot more fuel and sustenance to support those daily activities. So if we're cutting back on calories, that can compromise those behaviors or our ability to take action in the world. The 80-20 rule is a good one to think about, that 80% of the time we want to be eating healthy, balanced diets, getting all the different food groups in there. And 20% of the time we might not eat something that's so nutritious for us, but it might taste really good, or it might be a celebration that we're engaging in. And to not have judgment around that 20%. If 80% of the time we're eating really balanced diet, then that's the majority of what we're putting into our bodies, and that's a really, really good thing. And that 20% is something that hopefully we won't stress too much on or have too much guilt around, but instead maybe have some acceptance for every once in a while. So the last point here is really looking at resiliency, and resiliency being one's ability to bounce back or recover or change from a difficult personal experience. So that ability to adapt to a circumstance or ability to adapt to something that might be really difficult. And in looking at eating disorders and disordered eating, resiliency can be really powerful because it's that ability to adapt to situations that might be really difficult versus necessarily turning to controlling one's eating behaviors or exercising behaviors, but finding alternatives that support one's overall health, emotionally, physically, mentally. Some ideas here in terms of how to build resiliency, some potentially positive coping skills or mechanisms, maybe ignoring or the bombardment of media messages that you might see. Sometimes it's really hard to ignore them, so sometimes even engaging with them in a different way, recognizing that they've been really airbrushed or photoshopped. So in that way, criticizing, being critical about the media messages that you see. Acknowledging what your inner strengths are, focusing on things other than just your appearance. Positive affirmations with friends, having supportive friends. That can be one friend, that can be a whole group of friends. Having someone to talk to, whether that be a parent or a teacher, a school counselor, a friend. Having those supports can be really powerful. And knowing where to go if help is needed as well. This next video is one of two young girls sharing their story about how they recovered from eating disorders and what their recovery looked like for them. As you'll see, on some of the cue cards that they hold up, they speak about Ed, and here they're speaking about their
Here I am waiting, I'll have to leave soon, why am I holding on? We knew this day would come, we knew it all along, how did it come so fast? This is our last night, but it's late, and I'm trying not to sleep, 'cause I know when I wake, I will have to slip away. And when the daylight comes, I'll have to go, but tonight I'm gonna hold you so close, 'cause in the daylight we'll be on our own, but tonight I need to hold you so close. Ooh, oh, 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 oh.
here are some resources to turn to if you yourself are struggling or you know someone who's struggling. If you are in school, your school counselor is probably one of the best places to go to start. They can provide you with resources and some planning around how to support you in whatever you might be struggling with around disordered eating or eating disorders. And then of course Jessie's Legacy, you can call us. Shelley Hine is the coordinator of Jessie's Legacy, and she is happy to answer any questions, provide support in terms of where to go for resources in the Lower Mainland. You can also turn to Jessie's Legacy's website with we have lots of information up there, also about some of the groups that are running to support those who are struggling with disordered eating and eating disorders. And then of course there's North Shore Youth Eating Disorder Clinic. You can call them for assistance as well, and the Vancouver Crisis Center is always a really wonderful resource to connect with. So here we've also listed the video links if you want to check out any of the videos, and we hope that this has given you a snapshot into what disordered eating is and how it can contribute to the development of eating disorders, and also maybe finding ways to engage with this discussion and have more awareness about it in terms of its prevalence, and hopefully finding ways to support yourself to get some help.